This is I believe, the second, yes, I believe it's the second teaching in the Gospel of Luke chapter 14. This one we're simply calling, Where Should I Sit? It's based on verses 7 to 11, and in preparing for this, there were a number of words that I wanted to make sure that when we look and we see it in English, we have an idea, an approximation of what we think is being said, but realizing that English isn't what they were speaking, we want to make sure that we're getting the correct nuance of what's actually going on. I found a number of words that were close, but different meanings could be pulled from. So I took it upon myself to look everything up, and I realized there was a lot of things that needed to be redefined. There were a lot of things that different words should be chosen. And to complicate things, I didn't want to just say each and every one of those words and what they meant, and then hopefully you wouldn't fall asleep. But I did find a translation, it's an old translation, that really did a wonderful job on this. So for this teaching, and I've never used this translation before, but for this teaching, I'll be using mostly the Douay-Rheims. And our verses again are Luke 14, 7 to 11. And he spoke a parable also unto them that were invited, marking how they chose the first seats at the table. Many are things they just say the select seats, but this first seat, that was the prime position. That was the most prestigious position, and it was known as the first seat or the first position. So they did a really good job on that. It's a saying to them, when thou art invited to a wedding, take note, this is not a festival. This is a wedding. Keep that in mind. Many interpretations. Yes, they recognized it was a feast. But what's happening at the wedding? You have a bride and a groom coming together in holy matrimony. And I'll play my cards out real quick on this one, and usually I don't do this. Who are the most important people at a wedding? There are three parties that are most important at a wedding, if you're of a Hebrew mindset. In order, that would be God, the groom, and the bride. And of course, you can switch the order of the last two, but the first one is always the first one. Because in a Hebrew wedding, it was a husband, it was a man and a woman joining in holy matrimony with God as the third party of that union. So keep that in mind. When thou art invited to a wedding, sit not down in the first place. Why wouldn't you sit down? Who would decide who's most important? Who did we say the players were in this? God, groom, bride. So who decides importance? God, groom, bride. Right? This is a very unique wedding we're talking about, too, so that plays in even more so. When thou art invited to a wedding, sit not down in the first place, lest perhaps one more honourable than thou be invited by him. And he that invited thee and him come and say to thee. Now I wanna get this in early, because I didn't get this in when I put the teaching together. I just prayed to God that I would remember to say this, and since I'm remembering to say it now, I'm going to play my hand a little early again. This may be a pattern for this teaching of me playing things out a little early. When this says, come and say to him, that's not a figure of speech. If you decided at this wedding that you're obviously the most important person there, they've got to see that. I mean, that's obvious to you and, well, everyone else. And you go and you take the first seat, and it says, come to say to thee. In other words, and we'll look at the triclinium a little bit here, and you'll see how it's laid out. The groom is going to stand up in front of everybody He is going to walk over to where you are sitting. Now, these are three couches sit in a U type of formation. Can everybody see the groom get up? Will they notice that he walks over to you?
Yes.
Is there any way he can do that discreetly that doesn't draw attention? No.
Not really.
No. All eyes are on the guests of honor. He is going to get up from his seat. He is going to walk over to you. So when that says, come and say to thee, he's not just going to say, David, you want to move over there? You know, and where if other people are having conversation about other things before the ceremony's really up and rolling, they won't notice. They're going to notice if he stands up and walks over to you.
Yes.
But what's he going to say? Give this man place. Now, the English, he's just going to say, you would think, okay, he's just saying, hey, you sat in the wrong place. You need to go over there. And maybe say that discreetly. But in the language that's used here, I wasn't able to trace it back to the Hebrew word, but what I can tell you from the Greek, when it says, give this man place, do it now. It carries the emphasis. It's not a suggestion. Those words mean that you are to take immediate action. What would we say? Post haste. So when you read that, know the groom is getting up, walking over right to you, and he is saying immediately, put this into action where you are moving now into that seat because you don't belong here. Everybody sees this. Well, understanding that, the next verse explains itself, doesn't it? And then thou begin with shame to take the lowest place. Of course you begin with to take the lowest place with shame. You ascribed honor to yourself. You decided who would be honored and who wasn't. You're not the guest of honor. And the guest of honor picked up, walked over in front of you, and gave you instructions of what you need to do immediately. This almost explains it. I could end this teaching right after this screen, and you'd pretty much have the gist of it. But when thou art invited, go sit down in the lowest place. It makes sense, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. You don't want that to happen. That when he who invited thee cometh and say to thee, friend, go up higher. It's the same thing. He's going to walk right up to you. If he's going to walk right up to you in front of everybody, what do you want him to say? Well done, thou good and faithful servant? Or you don't belong there. Wow. See, you don't see this in the English. This is why we dig a little bit deeper. This is also why we remember it's a wedding. It says, then shalt thou have glory. And some of the things say worship, and it's not worship. It's glory. It's honor. Then shalt thou have glory before them that sit at the table with thee, because every one that exalteth himself shall be humbled, and he that humbles himself shall be exalted. I laugh about people who do 10-minute teachings and saying you really don't get what you need in it. Well, I proved myself wrong with this teaching because we really don't need to go any further. But if you know me, you know I'm going to. In verse 7, which we've already read, we're going to do a little bit on that. He marked how they chose the chief rooms. And see, this is one of the things where I had to get in and start looking up words, because a lot of this is the King James here. They say rooms, but we know it's the chief seats, or the first seat, and that's why I chose the Dewey Rim. They did a great job on this. The Greek word rendered marked, and it's only used 5 times in the New Testament. It's something that you gave attention to. You noted. What might we say in our usage? Well, that's interesting. Huh. You know, you ever have those situations where you're just looking, there's just something that sort of catches your eye. There's something that sparks your interest. There's something that draws your attention to it. That's basically what this is saying. Literally means gave attention or observed. When the men began selecting their seats of honor at the house where the meal was held, remember, wedding, Christ was watching the maneuvering. Gee, wouldn't he be a guest of honor?
You would think so.
You'd think so. Christ was watching the maneuvering on the part of the scribes and the doctors, or the religious teachers and wealthy guests, to secure the higher and more honorable seats. Now, remember, what happened in verses 1 to 6? There was a person who was uninvited. Remember, there's a reason we covered that first, and there's a reason we said you always have to know what the pretext is to know what your text means. Because that's what brought that on. Remember the gentleman with dropsy? He wouldn't have been invited. Matter of fact, even after he was healed, he was dismissed. But everybody would have thought they were above him. They wouldn't have ascribed any honor to him. They would have automatically assumed that because he had this condition, and we talked about what a serious condition it was, that he must have done something to aggravate God. So he can't possibly be a man of honor. He can't possibly be anybody that important. He's reaping what he sowed. What did Christ do? What did the man of honor do? Healed him. Healed him. He knew he wasn't invited. He didn't make a big scene. He didn't do anything to embarrass anybody. He healed him. That's what started this whole thing. This is what Yeshua is trying to teach people. God decides where that honor comes from. That's why he does it in the course of a wedding, because they understood about a messianic banquet. That isn't something the church created. That was something that was well understood. But in the essence of a messianic wedding, when he's talking about who would assign, in the idea that it is a wedding, not just a feast, but the idea that it is a wedding, he was indirectly identifying himself, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. This is the thing we miss. That's why I say it's important to realize it's a wedding. It's a wedding. This, as we have noted earlier, is what prompted his giving the parable that is found in our text for this chapter. The triclinium. I found a lot of pictures on this. They were all deeply disappointing. There was not enough detail. There was a lot of them that's like, well, that could be a triclinium, but it could be something else. Gang, and I'm really sorry for this, but I had to settle for a drawing. So here's what we've got. Okay. It almost looks like they rolled up 3 beds, doesn't it?
Yep.
That's what you're looking at. Now, there's some disagreement on where the host sat. The most important seat is to the right of the host. The next is to the left of the host, and then the farther away, are the least desirable seats. Some would have you say that it was either the couch on the left or the right, and in the middle of one of those. I tend not to buy that. I do believe you can see the couch at the top a little bit. See, that's why I really didn't like the drawing. I was hoping for a real good picture. I tend to believe that in the middle, at the top of our so-called U, the middle would be, and most information I found on that confirmed that would be the most important seat. And that would make sense. Everybody would be able to see the host, wouldn't they? Anybody coming in would be able to see the host. So keep this diagram in mind because it plays into other things and other areas of Scripture that will come up as we go forward. At banquets, the basic item of furniture was the couch for three, the triclinium. A number of triclinia were arranged into a U shape around a low table. That's why I put that picture in, so you get a little bit of a point of reference, because just describing it sometimes isn't enough. Guests reclined on their left elbows. The place of highest honor was the central position on the couch at the base of the U, which is what we talked about. The second and third places were those on the left of the principal man, reclining behind him, and on his right, reclining with the head on his bosom. There's going to be scriptures going through your mind as you think about this, and I won't tell you what they were. I'll let you have that. After this, there seems to have ranked the couch to the left, with the places as on the first couch, then that to the right of the first, and so on. Oriental customs as to who reclined were at the table were even more serious matters of honor than modern egalitarian seating charts, and they were frequently given religious connotations. At Qumran, in other words, the Dead Sea community, even the entering procession was strictly established with the priest and the Levites and all the people one after another, each according to the perfection of their spirit. In other words, you see where the honor descends as it gets farther away from the host, to the left and to the right. And it says that every Israelite may know his place in the community of God according to the everlasting design. No man shall move down from his place, nor move up from his allotted position. Okay. After the synagogue service on the Sabbath, Jews would eat a substantial meal to which quite often a number of guests were invited. A leading Pharisee had invited Yeshua to such a noon meal with the purpose of trapping him. That never works, does it?
Not really.
It was tried. It was tried. But if you match wits with God, you're going to come up short. If you're looking for answers and you're not sure, talking to him is the best idea you can have. Trying to trap him? Never going to work. There, right in front of Yeshua, was a man with dropsy. Would Jesus heal on the Sabbath, or would he wait until the evening when the Sabbath had ended? Remember, we talked about that in our last teaching, so I don't want to get into too much of that now. Yeshua healed the man and sent him home because the Pharisees refused to answer his question whether it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not. Imagine this. We talked about dropsy. It's a very physical thing. It's a sign of a deeper problem, a serious problem. So let's just say, and this isn't the case, but let's say the guy's name is Bob. Bob walks in, he doesn't make a scene, but oh man, you can tell just by looking at Bob, there is something seriously wrong. You would know that Bob was hoping to receive some type of mercy, some type of healing just by looking at him. Excuse me, Bob. You want to wait a minute while we discuss whether it's lawful to heal you or not? How's that going to look? How do you think God thinks about that? It's really ludicrous when you think that this is the mindset. That we need to let poor Bob just sit there and wait till the sun goes down, and then we can help this poor man who has a very serious condition. Medical technology in the first century wouldn't have known exactly what that condition was, but it would have been known that it was a serious condition. But hey, we've got our customs. We've got our own version of halakha. And we can't be sure. Bob, you're just going to have to wait. We can't risk it. Wow. He put a further question to them and thus appealed to their sense of compassion and mercy. If your son or your ox, see now, we talked about this, There are different translations, and some of the translations say son, but we talked about how it's an ox or a donkey. This person went with the other translation. And they were both the ox and the donkey. They were animals that they were your John Deere of the day, weren't they? They were what did the work on your farm, so you didn't have to pull these things yourself. You didn't have to carry these burdens yourself. They were very valuable to your success and what you could produce and how much you could produce and how quickly you could produce it. So your livelihood was based on these animals to a large extent. So if something happened to them, oh, you better believe you're going to do something to get up. That's your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeshua says, if they fall into a well, of course you're going to do something, aren't you?
Right.
How much more so should you do something for a person? How much more valuable in God's eyes is this person? Sorry, Bob, you got to wait till the sun goes down. No offense if your name is Bob. I just give him a name to make it more real, to personalize it a little bit. In this less than congenial atmosphere, where guests had selfishly picked the best seats at the table, remember, it's a wedding! Yeshua taught the parable of the arrogant guest a lesson in humility. He used the setting of a wedding feast to which a number of guests had been invited. Couches at a wedding feast were arranged in the shape of an elongated horseshoe consisting of a number of tables. That's what we showed you earlier in the picture of triclinium. The man receiving the highest honor was at the head table, what they called the base. The second and third places to the left and the right. And they always say to the left, but it depends on whether you're talking the host's right,
Mm-hmm.
or the people as you're looking at the host, that right. But gang, when you're talking about importance and you're talking about second importance, however you're determining right, it's always to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the host right or the people looking at the host right, I'm guessing it would be to the right of the host, as determined by the host on his right. Because what's on God's right hand is blessed. What God has on his left hand does not have as high a blessing. Matter of fact, when Scripture wants to determine what's with God and what's not with God, what's with God is always to the right. So keep that in mind. You're really going to go, you want to be on the host's right-hand side. That's going to be the first seat. The man receiving the highest honor was at the head table with the second and third places to the left and the right of the person. Every couch accommodated 3 people, with the middle man receiving the highest honor. The couch to the left of the head of the table was next in order of priority, and after that the couch to the right, consequently. Jewish guests were governed by the social etiquette of the day to find the correct place at the table. Well, if it's just a feast, then yeah, you might look and say, well, we're the teachers or this and that, and I'm not saying that's right. I can see where that would happen. But how ludicrous is it at a wedding to decide that you're more important? Tell me something. Do you know anybody who got married? And I pray that you didn't do this to somebody who got married. But you said, and we'll pick on Bob, being we've already started. Bob's getting married, and you go, hey, Bob, I'm your best man.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody who did that? I pray to God you don't. I pray to God that we don't see stuff like that. Do you determine that you're Bob's best man? Or does Bob determine who his best man is?
Always should be Bob.
Always. Bob. He's the one getting married. He chooses his best man. Just like the bride, when she's deciding who her maid of honor is. Somebody go up and says, hey, Jane, I'm your maid of honor. And she says, no, Bob, you're the groom. Okay, no, a little fun. But, it's one of the things is the person who's being honored that day is the one who determines who the higher positions of honor are. Well, what did we say are the three parties in a wedding? God, the groom, and the bride. You may talk amongst yourselves about where who's second and who's third, but God's always first. That's why Yeshua uses the wedding. However, if the privilege of choosing seats was given to the invited guests, they could very well display selfishness, conceit, and pride. And this was exactly what happened at the house of the prominent Pharisees to which Yeshua was invited. Now, what's real interesting, and it makes this even more amazing, is they believed in the first century that when the Messiah came, see, you had teachers, the two main teachers, the two main schools of thought. And there were others, but the two main schools of thought were a school of Hillel and a school of Shammai. And the differences between these, and this is not going to be a whole teaching on these two, just to let you know, but the differences between these two people were so on the opposite ends of the spectrum in places that it was almost believed that there were two Torahs, because their interpretation of the Torah was so at opposite extremes that it was often believed that there were two Torahs. But you know what? There wasn't. There was one Torah, but two very different ways of how to enforce it. What do you think these same people felt about the Messiah? They said that when the Messiah came, his Torah, and they referred to it as new Torah. They said when the Messiah comes, his interpretation of Torah will be as if a new Torah. And then they would say right after that, will it be a new Torah? They say, heaven forbid. The idea was it was going to be so radically perfect, so radically beyond the comprehension of anything that had been seen before, that it would seem as a new Torah. Think Messianic banquet. Had you equated, and this was within the realm of feasibility, that at a Messianic banquet in the apocalyptic Jewish mind of the first century, that the Messiah would be the groom. If he has an interpretation of Torah, this new Torah, not New Testament, gang, I know you're going there, but this halakha of how to carry out the Torah that is above and beyond man ever came up with, would you be judging him by your halakha or not?
You try initially.
You would fail if you tried. Do you see what's happening here? They're trying to judge the Messiah by their halakha. Gang, we've got churches that do this. We've got messianic ministries that do this. They are going to judge Yeshua by their halakha, by their interpretation. And when the Messiah, the one who gave his life on the cross for them, shows up and he doesn't match their expectations, they are going to find him to be at fault because they're judging him by their halakha, by their understanding, instead of sitting down, paying attention, being gentle, and letting the Spirit of God reveal who is there before them and teach them his Torah. You see the irony of the situation here. Pray to God that you don't make the same mistake the Pharisees made. Many churches, many messianic ministries, many different denominations of things that call themselves Christian, and I'm not here to do a big, long diatribe about who is and who isn't. Just make sure that you're not judging God by your reasoning. Because your reasoning, as Job found out, didn't he, might be at fault. But do you remember Job? Do you remember Job at one point when he finally realized what's going on? And somewhere around, if not after Job 38, and he said, you know, if I were to speak, my own lips would condemn me. You don't want to go through that, do you? I call it the Job 38 experience. And that is what will happen. If you're judging God by your halakha and saying this is who He's going to be, the Spirit of God will reveal the Messiah. Because in many things we all get wrong, gang. And the Spirit of God will show us where we're in error if we're silent to receive it. Keep that in mind. Let's try not to repeat ourselves here, but I'm pretty sure we're going to. And this was exactly what happened at the house of prominent Pharisees to which Yeshua was invited. Pharisees and expert in the law had created a climate of haughtiness and arrogance devoid of love and humility. In this setting, Yeshua taught a lesson of self-abasement. Places of honor. When the head of a family was prepared for the feast, he would invite the guests to recline at various places of importance. The two highest places of honor at the table were on the right and the left sides of the family head or the host. The highest place of honor being on the right side of the host. As we talked about earlier, the importance of the right side has been significant throughout Jewish life and thought. So here we go. The examples. The Talmud speaks of Aaron's second command to Moses as on Moses' right side. When it reads, Rabbi Ruda stated, Aaron was always on Moses' right. Again, the importance of right hand is seen in the following words from the Talmud. Judah said, one who walks at his master's right hand is a bore, but we have learned the deputy high priest is at his right and the head of the ministering family at his left, and furthermore was taught of three walking along. The teacher should walk in the middle, the greater of the disciples to his right, the smaller one at his left. And thus do we find that of the three angels who came to visit Abraham, Michael went in the middle, Gabriel at his right, and Raphael at his left. This knowledge helps to explain the request of the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Had you been thinking about this earlier? That her two boys might sit upon the right and left sides of Messiah in the kingdom. And making this request, the wife of Zebedee and her two sons are asking for the two privileged positions in the coming eschatological glory of his reign and kingdom. Remember I said they had, because you're going to find things that say, and people who say, they were not eschatological in the first century. Oh, yes, they were. They were looking for the end. They did have an understanding of a messianic banquet, a messianic wedding, as it will. Let's see here. In making this request, the wife of Zebedee and her two sons are asking for the two privileged positions in the coming eschatological glory of his reign and kingdom, which are not usually is pictured as a messianic banquet. It is further interesting to note the positions of John and Judas at the Last Supper. As previously discussed, it seems clear that John and Judas were reclining on the right and left sides of Yeshua, who was acting as the host for the meal. Since John was lying on Yeshua's breast, it seems correct to say that he was reclining on the right side of Yeshua in the most honored place, while Judas was reclining on the left of Yeshua in the second highest position. It is little wonder that the disciples did not suspect such an honored guest as the traitor of Yeshua. On verse 8, this is when thou art invited to wedding, sit not down in the first place, lest perhaps one more honourable than thou should be invited by him. Among the high places, one would of course be the highest of all, namely for the guests. Since this is a wedding, it would be the upper place on the couch that was nearest to the groom, and thus the lowest place would be the minor one on the couch that was farthest away. Stands to reason. Shame and honor. This is something that we do have to talk about. I know when I grew up, if you had a bad name or a bad reputation, that was something that either you never really outlived in your neighborhood growing up, maybe you get to another school and you got a chance to start over, or you got a different group of friends who didn't care, but that stuck with you, didn't it? You know, I mean, you wanted a good name, or no name at all was better than a bad name, wasn't it? Just to blend in and not be seen was better than a bad reputation. But we also know that as time changes, as time goes on, as we see the media redefine what's good and what's bad, what's honorable and what's dishonorable, that sometimes we're given a name that's, in the world's eyes, that's filled with contempt, isn't it? But in God's eyes, it's very honorable. And in other times, we get so far away from God that the concept of shame and honor doesn't even apply. We just simply become numb. Who cares? This is who I am. Deal with it. So in some ways, we've lost an understanding of shame and honor. Other ways, it's been perverted. So we need to talk about what this was in the first century, because in the first century, and especially in an Oriental style culture, whether your name carried honor or shame was a very, very powerful thing. A few remarks are in order with respect to the shame-honor motif in the New Testament culture. Molina and Nere, these are two wonderful authors that spend a lot of time talking about this. They deal with the not as much the historical aspect of the New Testament, but with sociology. Not socialism, I'm no big fan of that, but with the sociology of the New Testament. They're pretty good at what they do. Molina and Neri provide some cognate remarks on this cultural value. Honor is the positive value of a person in his or her own eyes, the positive appreciation of that person in the eyes of his or her group. So, and I hate to use this word, or this phrase, but your own self-esteem. You know, because I believe that in we are not so much as we don't esteem in ourselves. Our esteem is to be for God. And our goal and our insight should be, is my life honoring God or dishonoring God? And our pleasure in ourselves should be in the fact that we hear those words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Our joy should come from the fact that we receive from Him affirmation that our lives are honoring and pleasing Him. And this is something we've gotten our eyes off of. In this perspective, honor is a claim to positive worth along with a social acknowledgement of that worth by others. Honor is linked with face, or saving face, as we would say, and respect. At stake is how others see us and how we should see ourselves. By way of contrast, a shameless person is one who does not recognize the rules of human interaction. Gang, those rules change. And hence, social boundaries. People get shamed, or not have shame, when they aspire to a certain status which is denied them by public opinion. When a person realizes he is being denied the status, he is or gets shamed. He is humiliated and stripped of honor for aspiring to a value not socially his. You know what's interesting? Because within Judaism, they would consider the fact that you humiliated somebody or embarrassed somebody, they would actually equate that with murder. To destroy someone's reputation in Judaism was equated with murder because all the blood would go to the face and they would turn red. So they would take it to say, you didn't actually take the life from the person, but to destroy the honor of that person in front of others was put along the same type of sin to protect a person's honor, to protect a person's integrity. That was something held in high esteem. Yeshua looks to the familiar and cultural practice of rank and status of the village. Persons who promote themselves incur shame, while persons who make no claims and act with humility and modesty are promoted and bestowed with honor, visible to all. One point, my wife and I, we were part of a messianic ministry, and there was a gal, and she was covered from head to toe, and she was the kind of person that in a crowd you wouldn't see her. But when it came time to praise God, if you were a guy and your heart was beating, the love that this gal had for God would catch your eye, would catch your heart, and you would never forget the love you saw for God in the way that this gal worshipped. But if you just saw her in a crowd, you wouldn't remember you saw her. She never brought attention to herself. She never lifted herself up. Never once was there an ounce of braggart in her. I've met a guy like this too when I had a ministry that met regularly here where I'm at now. I put a person who didn't have as good of vocal talents as somebody else we had to choose from. Didn't have as good of musical skills as other people we had to choose from. But I'll tell you what, he got the job because when he praised God, that's all he noticed at that moment in time, was that he was praising God. And that's all that mattered. There were people who knew music really well, and they would say, oh, he missed this note, oh, he didn't do this, oh, he didn't do that. But there were people who came there to praise God. It was infectious. I don't know how else to describe it. But he never raised himself up. He never talked of personal accomplishments. He didn't do anything to draw attention to himself. What he did was draw attention to God. Gang, I'm telling you, that's infectious. People catch that. That glorifies God. The Ruach HaKodesh moves freely in a place like that. It wasn't performance-based. It was actual honoring God-based. Something to keep in mind. That was a bonus. Okay, I've been doing this a lot today. In addition, the modest person is addressed with the term friend, a term which also suggests intimacy and equality with the host. Boy, that just takes on a whole new meaning when we look at it as a wedding, doesn't it? Real honor does not come from self-seeking, but is bestowed by another. In this case, God. Thus, through this parable, the honor-seeking guests Verse 7, are shamed for their attitude and aggressive behavior, which also correlates with the shame of guests who maliciously wait for Yeshua to take a wrong step with the sick man. Sorry, Bob, you gotta wait. Sun hasn't gone down yet. Yeshua, however, subverts the socially shared map, wherein people value their own worth and the worth of others on the basis of their social space within the village. Well, we're the interpreters of the law. Well, you know what? You're sitting before the creator of the universe. Whose interpretation do you want? Ow! That's an easy one. Maybe hard to swallow, but it's an easy answer. Honor and shame were values that shaped everyday life in biblical times. Honor, the primary measure of social status, was based upon ascribed honor and acquired honor. Inherited or ascribed honor was social standing due to being part of a social unit, principally the family. Those born to rulers and leaders were held in high esteem due to a family honor. Jewish preoccupation with genealogies ensured inherited honor was secure. On a side note, I had one point I was putting myself through a seminary that the church I was going to at the time started up. And I had a teacher who was extremely adept at explaining things in a way he could take the complex and make it simple. He could explain things in a way to where you not only got it, but you could take that and apply it and teach somebody else. Very gifted. Very gifted. And I was telling him something that I learned from him, and to me, it led to a very profound experience. He is there with his wife as I'm telling him this, and she had a smile on her face because she knew how this was going to turn out. I didn't know the teacher as well as his wife, obviously, and I'm starting explaining. And he interrupts the story to tell me where he thinks the story is going. Where he thinks the story is going is how amazed they were about his teaching. And I paused and I looked at him and I says, no. Because I had asked him, I says, you know what the most amazing thing was? And that was his answer. I said, no. I said, the most amazing thing was, is being able to look in the person that you're ministering to. You don't have I didn't have a degree or any type of worldly training that would suggest that I would have the talent, the know-how, the skills to see such a thing happen. But as you're ministering to somebody that God has called you to minister to in that moment, and to look into the eyes of the person you're ministering and see hope and see courage and to see life come back into that person at that very moment, to see them light up with renewed hope, to see them light up with the strength to move forward, the courage to face whatever they're facing, the confidence to know that God has seen and heard them, and the strength, His strength, to go on, to see the moment that happens on a person's face and a person's eyes. That is beyond human worth. You can't put a price on that. When you go and you minister out on the streets and you preach the word to the lost, it's not about winning an argument. It's not about accumulating numbers and getting some kind of marriage badge for the amount of people who have prayed the prayer. But it's that look in a person's eyes, that look on their face, that countenance you see change to know that they in that moment in time have been translated into the kingdom of God, to know in that moment of time that they have truly made God king of their life. There's no way to put a value on that. Now, funny thing is, his wife knew it was coming. He didn't. You see where it applies to this teaching. He was placing the honor on himself for thinking what a great teacher he was. I was thanking him for giving me the tools that God could draw on those tools to change this person's life. That should have been the most important thing that day. That life that was changed. That person who had truly been touched by God. That's the honored thing. Acquired honor was gained through meritorious deeds or public performance. Family social position provided the honor base from which males launched out with the hope of increasing family and personal honor. The public forum provided challenges for gaining or losing honor. A challenge might show the superiority of one person or group over another. A challenge could be ignored if not worthy of response due to social distance between the parties, but a true honor challenge required response. Can you imagine that? Having your integrity questioned, having it challenged, being put in a position that your action or reaction was going to raise or elevate you, depending on what the community was looking for or expected. Can you imagine in the days we live in, because this still happens, in the days when we live in, when God is held in very low esteem, when the values of society are not compatible with the things of God, and we are put in a position to have to choose. Be honored by society or be honored by God. I could go on for a long time about this, but I think that one sentence says everything it needs to. Or at least everything I feel I'm supposed to say on the matter, so I will leave it at that. The party recognized as winning gained honor, and the other lost honor or social standing. For example, when the Pharisees and the Herodians observed Yeshua to see if he would heal the man with the withered hand in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, 1-6, an honor challenge took place. If Yeshua violated Sabbath law, he would lose honor. If he did not heal the man, he would also lose honor. The trap looked perfect. They continuously tried to set him up with stuff like this. In response to this unethical challenge, Yeshua clarified the Sabbath's intent so he could lawfully heal the man. When the trap failed, they decided to collaborate to destroy Yeshua and his raising social status, which came at their expense. You know, we've got stuff like this when we say, we're offended. We're offended. That offends me. You know, truth doesn't have the power to offend. I've been saying this for years. Truth convicts, and when that conviction hits, that is the part that leads to freedom. Conviction leads to freedom. But you know what freedom is? Freedom is a door. Freedom is a door that is no longer locked. It's been unlocked. The conviction has unlocked the door. You still have to go over there, open the door, and walk through it, don't you?
Yes.
Absolutely. Or you can turn around and go out the other door in your self-righteousness. More often than not, when we say we're convicted, we're actually holding on to self-righteousness. because the Ruach HaKodesh, which is bringing the conviction. Shame was not simply the opposite of honor. Both positive and negative shame existed. Shame could be handled positively by knowing how to keep matters out of public awareness. For example, a woman could bear shame well by remaining covered in public and by avoiding male-dominated arenas. Shame could also designate honor or a loss of honor. When people claimed an undeserved place of honor, shame resulted. In verses 9 to 10, and he that invited thee and him came and say to thee, remember I talked about this, he's going to stand up, walk right in front of you, everyone's going to see it. Give this man place, in other words, do this immediately, post haste, and then thou begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when thou art invited, go sit down in the lowest place, that when he who invited thee cometh, he may say to thee, friend. Wow. Friend. What did he say to the other guy? Do this now. Didn't have to insult him. Didn't have to put any type of negative name, adjective, nothing. Just the fact that you don't belong to that spot. Get to where you belong. You see the one being lifted up? He's not only being told to move to a point of higher honor, but you see what he's being called? Friend, go up higher. Then thou shalt have glory before them that sit at the table with thee. You know, it's a pretty easy question. Would you rather be called friend and raised up, or told you're in the wrong, you ascribed yourself the wrong seat and go back to where you belong? That's pretty easy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's like asking whether you'd rather have a delicious meal or a glass full of poison. The answer should be simple. The host did not hesitate to regulate the position of his guest after they had seated themselves. So you already know that could happen, don't you, going in? He may not see you the way you do. He gave the highest rank, the chief place, sending the guest up or down as circumstances required. Nowadays, the gracious host uses place cards for the seating guests rather than embarrassing someone needlessly by moving them publicly to a more appropriate seat. Guests have been known to switch place cards for their own purposes, though.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to work for God? Well, I don't know. This is where the card was. Oh, sure it was, after you changed them. Absolutely. God's not going to go, oh, you got me. Didn't see that coming. Verse 10, thou shalt have worship. This is the word the King James used. And, you know, I'm a big fan of the King James. And there are times that back then there probably wasn't any type of misunderstanding with this word means. But now we look at it and we're going, what? That just doesn't seem quite right. And that's why this note is in here. I shall have worship. The word worship here means honor. They who are sitting with you shall treat you with respect. Why? Because they see that the host places you in respect. They will learn your rank by your being invited nearer to the head of the table, and it will be better to learn it than by putting yourself forward. They will do you honor because you have shown a humble spirit. Do you remember the people I used as examples that I told you, the stories that I told you as we went through this teaching? Not one of those people who was honorable drew attention to themselves. See, our lives are to be constructed in such a way that we bring honor to God. And when we bring honor to God, the world has no way to understand that. Because the world looks at self-esteem. They want to feel good about themselves. And so they're going to interpret it that way. Initially, they're going to see that you appear to feel good about yourself because you praise God. They're going to say that you got religion. They're going to say, well, I tried God, and they're going to find all different things, but the world also looks at love the same way. How many love songs? I, me, right?
Yeah.
How many worship songs? I, me.
Yep. These days.
What is love? Love starts from a person and is shared with another. It doesn't depend on being loved or feeling loved. It goes out. See, this is the thing that people miss. So the fact the world's going to see that you have this love for God, that it's going to go out, and at first they're going to misunderstand it. But eventually, God will show them what love truly is. To be able to love is one of the greatest gifts that God gives us. In this time period that we call life, the ability to love something. We are so consumed with this feeling loved. But when you love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, and you feel that love of God come upon you, you feel that approval from God, you feel that reassurance that you're doing the right thing, you're going in the right way, you can't put a price on that. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, let me bring it to a very basic level. This applies to a child. This could apply to your spouse. This could apply to your pet. Because I don't want anybody to feel left out. This could even apply to a friend. But when you do something, or you get a gift for something that you wish to express love towards, and you see the joy that it brings the other party, that was your reward. That is what builds you up. Not the fact that they turn around and give you a gift back. But imagine how you feel when you say something, when you talk to somebody and they come into the kingdom. And you see their life changed. In a moment, you see their life changed. And you probably thought, I'm not the type of person who can make a difference. I don't have these tools. I don't have these talents. I don't have the knowledge. I don't possess worldly honor. But yet you see that moment, that life changes. You start to understand what love really is. Even in a dog, you get a dog something that they absolutely love and they get all excited. The dog can't give you anything you haven't given it. Can't go out and make your car payment. Can't go out and do anything for you. The dog, all he can do is that joy, or bring you his own toys, which, by the way, you got for him.
Right.
But you see, you understand it even from the level on a pet. You understand it on the thing of a child. See, that's the fun for the thing that we have with birthdays or even Christmas. And I'm not going to get into what I think on these now, but the idea with a child, and when you get the child a gift as a parent, and you watch, and they never thought they were going to get this, and they've got all these huge dreams of what they're going to do with their new gift, and all these things they planned on doing, and everything, and they're just all excited, and they can't wait, and to go over and find a place that's open Christmas Eve to get the battery so they can play with it now. Doesn't matter that you had to work all kinds of overtime to get it. that maybe you had to cut back and deny yourself, that joy is worth something. You can't put a price on that. You will always have that memory. That's what I'm talking about. That's what love is. To be able to see that joy in someone else. That's what makes you want to do it again. That's what our life is supposed to be for God. That's what His love is for us. He loves it. When He does something that just absolutely, that's His best. When He does something for us that just, like that little kid that just got that toy and can't wait to find a place where he can get the batteries and start playing. That's what God's love is for us. Gang, that's what Yeshua did for us on the cross. He made that possible. He made that love possible. I never saw this coming when I put this together. Oh, praise God. Glorify not thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men, for better is it that it be said unto thee, Come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thy eyes have seen. You know where that is? These are the scriptures they had in the first century. That's Proverbs. See, Yeshua used what they had, what they understood, to explain what they needed to understand. He didn't explain things on a godly level to where only He would get it. He always speaks to you in a way that you can understand, that you can grasp it. So He wasn't doing anything new. He doesn't do anything new. He wants to make sure you're going to get it. In Ben Sirah lived 200 years before Yeshua physically walked the planet. A lot of what Ben Sirah said was so correct in halakha and application of Scripture that it's amazing. Yeshua would have said stuff that coincided with Sirah on a number of occasions. Not all occasions, because I'm not telling you Ben Sirah is inspired. No. What am I telling you? That it was possible to understand what Yeshua preached at any given time. It was always possible to understand. Some did, some didn't. Some understood more than others. Ben Sirah, on a very high level, understood a lot of what Yeshua would clarify. And a lot of what Ben Sirah said, people would have understood, because Yeshua is going to not directly quote, but bring things in a way that's been brought around before, so you have a point of reference to get it. All that being said, my son, go on with thy business in meekness. So shalt thou be beloved of him that is approved. The greater thou art, the more humble thyself. And thou shalt find favor before the Lord. Many are in high place and of renown, but mysteries are revealed unto the meek. For the power of the Lord is great, and He is honored of the lowly. In verse 14:11, because everyone that exalteth himself shall be humbled, and he that humble himself shall be exalted. Ben Sirah, chapter 3, 17 and 24. Going right back to where we were, going on a little bit further. My son, go on with thy business in meekness. Let's see where this goes. So shalt thou be beloved of him that is approved. The greater thou art, the more humble thyself, and thou shalt find favor before the Lord. Many are in high place and of renown, but mysteries are revealed unto the meek. Look at this. For the power of the Lord is great, and He is honored of the who? Oh, you mean like that guy with dropsy? Hey, I'm over here! Somebody heal me! My name's Bob! Did he do that?
Nope.
Didn't say a thing. We don't have any of his words, do they? No. Seek out not the things that are too hard for thee, neither search the things that are above thy strength. So what are you doing? You're trusting in the Lord, aren't you? But what is commanded thee, Think thereupon with reverence. For it is not needful for thee to see with thine eyes the things that are in secret. Be not curious in unnecessary matters, for more things are showed unto thee than men can understand. For men are deceived by their own vain opinion. Almost looks like a commentary on our parable, doesn't it? And an evil suspicion hath overthrown their judgment. In conclusion, this is a fascinating book by Brad Young. Just about everything I've read of this gentleman, he has a gift for explaining things and making them very understandable. Moreover, Hillel's saying makes the listener assume the position of the one being judged. His approach makes reference to the summary of Torah requirements dealing with interpersonal relationship between individuals. Love your neighbor as yourself. Indeed, every individual is created in the divine image and is accountable to God. How can one pass judgment against one's neighbor when each individual is in the same condition of need? One should not pass judgment on another because no one wishes to be judged harshly by others. Hillel, remember the two schools we talked about? Hillel and Shammai. Hillel also taught, my humiliation is my exaltation. And my exaltation is my humiliation. It's from Leviticus Rabbah 1:5. This teaching focuses attention on how an individual causes himself or herself to be put to shame. By seeking honor, one loses respect. By practicing humility, one actually gains the respect and esteem of others, thereby causing oneself to be exalted. Yeshua gives a similar teaching using the divine passive voice. When he teaches the one who humbles himself will be exalted, he's saying that God will cause the one who practices humility to be honored and respected. The moral and ethical heritage of both Judaism and Christianity is rooted in the religious piety of the Second Temple period, Jewish faith and practice. The reason I pause, if you listen to me, and I've done this for years, gang, one time I'll say piety, another time I'll say piety. It's just one of those things. Of course, we're here in Texas where rules of pronunciation don't apply with some of the streets we got down here and some of the cities we got down here. You look at the way it's spelled, you pronounce it by the rules, and you realize that nobody pronounces that way, so that sure doesn't help. Okay, that's enough picking on Texas. Bonus stuff. I'm not actually going to get into the bonus stuff. This is here for your own time and stuff you can look at. I didn't want to put it in the teaching because it makes the teaching go on a bit more than people can or even want to stay focused. So it's on there if you want it. If you don't want it, that's fine too. Feel free to turn off the volume. I've only talking and babbling on so I can complete this. I've done this before without babbling. And what ends up happening is the program does not respond appropriately.